Welcome back. We pick this run up right where we left it in the previous episode. After expanding as far into industrial craft crops as possible given our material limitations, our next step is to make a villager farm. Gregtech New Horizons is based around a 1.7.10 build of Minecraft. This means that the more modern villager breeding mechanics have not been implemented yet, and as such we are going to have to go back to the good old standby of simply slamming a bunch of doors next to walls in villagers' vicinities. This process is a little more complicated than it initially appears, and villager breeding mechanics in this version are surprisingly nuanced. The number of villagers in any particular village is strictly limited to roughly 1/3 of the number of houses that village detects within its active area. More houses, therefore, means more potential villagers, and enough of both will enable iron golem spawning, which is useful but not achievable at the moment. At a minimum, we would need 45 doors. Each door requires 2 ingots of either iron or copper. We do not have either in any great quantity. What villagers consider a house is also a little bit weird. I won't go into the details, but the end result is that this is a house. This is 2 houses, and this is a set of 10 houses in a nice compact arrangement. No one ever said these guys were smart. To reiterate an earlier point, mob AI is really weird in this version of Minecraft. The end result is that basically any box with doors on the walls is going to be good enough to call it a day. The problem is that we do not have enough doors to make a scalable villager breeder with this mechanic. We can perhaps make a dozen doors, and 1/3 of that number is 4. Starting with the required 2 villagers would give us room for basically no villager propagation at all, because we would only be able to breed 2 and then would have to kill 2 to get 2 more. This means that we would be cycling through villagers extremely slowly. Instead, what we need to do is find a way of removing villagers from that village cap before they start counting against that maximum. To make a long and technical explanation very short, the easiest way of doing this for us is to just make sure all of the new villagers fall 64 or more blocks away from the exact center of whatever the village is classified as when we build it. This can easily be accomplished by placing the villager breeder 70-ish blocks up in the air and then just filtering all the babies into a drop chute to kick them out into a collection chamber. As we can afford more doors, we can later increase this number of villagers in the breeder, which will mean faster breeding, but it means that for now we can effectively breed infinite villagers using only 2. Also, have I mentioned mobs explode? Yeah, sheep can kill you in this mod pack, isn't that great? Separating out baby villagers from regular villagers is shockingly simple. All you need to do is design a gap that the babies can fit through and the adults cannot, because babies are short. They can actually fit into 1-block high gaps, but given that I'm going to be shoving them along with water, this is not a super reliable way of filtering because they like to swim up, so instead I will create a 1.25 block high gap by placing a zombie head over the drop chute. Forget mood lighting. All villagers need are doors, the sever heads of their enemies, and ankle-deep flowing water to get them going. The rest of the setup is blisteringly simple. It's literally just a wooden tube connecting to a giant wooden prop with some lighting to prevent unfortunate zombie massacres. As I'm preparing for the long and arduous process of shutting villagers upstairs, the minimap catches my attention. There's this giant sphere of gray garbage that you can see on top of my mob farm. That's a water creeper, and it looks like it detonated inside the farm proper. I go out to investigate and discover that not only has a water creeper detonated, but also a dark creeper has detonated because all of the torches up here that I used to block mob spawning have been removed. Boy howdy, am I glad I caught this early. This is deeply annoying, but it's kind of a cost of business with farms like this. There are so many weird interactions with different kinds of mobs that it's possible for them to aggro each other without any player involvement whatsoever, And when this happens, sometimes creepers get caught in the crossfire and detonate and make a huge mess of their surroundings. Since I don't need the mob farm at the moment, I go ahead and light it up. If this had happened earlier in the run, this would have been a nearly unsolvable catastrophe, but at our current stage, we have both access to water buckets and pickaxes, so when I next use the farm, it will just be time-consuming and annoying to fix rather than insurmountable. After that little distraction gets handled, I begin the process of creating all of my doors. I decided that I wanted to craft 8, which combined with the one I got as a quest reward for making a bed will put me at 9. This allows, in theory, for up to 3 villagers to be in the pen at any given time, and this is perfect. It's also the largest number of doors that I physically can craft with my current resources, which is also a limiting factor. After a truly idiotic amount of time spent grinding down my gold supply, crafting flimsy golden tools, and then watching them break in my hands, I eventually managed to poop out the required building materials. The first villager is quite well behaved and ends up shoved up the stairway with absolutely no problems. But when I push the second villager, I notice that it's sitting at half a heart. I decide to not risk it, go grab some of my spare healing potions that I've collected from loot bags, top the villager up, and then shove it in with its friend. I install doors nearby, and almost immediately little hearts start forming. This is a very good indicator that the villagers are ready and able to breed, so in theory it should just be a matter of time before babies start popping out at a truly unfathomable rate. After a solid Minecraft day of time passes, I haven't gotten a baby yet. This is a little unusual, so I go up and take a look, and I hypothesize that because the villagers are bouncing around in the water, that maybe they're blocking their own breeding process because it's being interrupted, so I go ahead and put some planks over their heads to help them stay put. I watched them, and they are both generating hearts, and it seems like they keep missing each other's breeding cycles, so I guess I'm just not getting very lucky. Villager breeding in this version relies on 2 villagers who are near each other both deciding to enter a breeding state at the same time. In a box with multiple villagers, this is usually pretty common, so your birth rates are stable, but with only 2 villagers, the chances of those cycles intersecting simultaneously is really quite small. So I decided to give it some more time, and a couple hours later, we'll go back and check after I've had some lunch. And nothing. This is a little concerning. So I decided to change the design up a bit again. Rather than having them sit in flowing water at all, I will instead put them on a single block platform surrounded by zombie heads. When a baby villager is born, there should be no spot in this arrangement where it can sit stably, so it will instead get shoved off the side by its parents, fall into a pit with flowing water, and then get dumped down the tube. This design works perfectly. I literally don't even have time to jump down to the bottom of the collection area before a baby is born and pooped out the chute. And after a nice relaxing walk around the neighborhood, villagers and emeralds on the ground. This feature is something added with Botania. Certain mobs have passive drops, and villagers' passive drop is chunks of spare change. In addition to being obviously useful for trading, emeralds are also nice as tools, and I can use them to craft fairly decent hammers rather than wasting more of my ever-diminishing supply of ductile material, which at this point is basically just gold. Sadly, none of the trades are good, but that's expected. I'm looking for a very few specific things, and we don't have a villager that can sell any of them yet, so I don't much care about the trades. After harvesting my crops, I have enough wheat to proceed through the first few cooking quests. I do my due diligence and hammer a couple out, but stop before actually crafting the bread for the next one. Uncertain of the potential rewards from food loot bags, I also check their drop pools in my creative world before claiming anything. They are all food drops, which I am entirely uninterested in, but I do take the loot bag anyway, because of all the other offerings, this is the only one I can't make myself. I also get a couple strawberry smoothies from it. Yippee. Anyway. Some more flailing around randomly, and the seed collection train chugs on. The smoothie recipe reminded me that I'd not started growing snowbells yet, which are an easy way of getting a little bit of snow. But let's get to the point of this exercise. With the farmer coins that I got from the cooking quests, I can actually purchase a couple of very useful things. The first is a set of Thaumcraft saplings. These saplings are the key to further progression in a massive number of ways. Without them, routing during the pre-Steam age would essentially turn into this hellscape of XP and mob farming to hunt for iron ingots. I don't want to have to edit that, and you don't want to have to watch that, so we're going to go with my strategy on this one. Instead, what I'm going to do is utterly ruin the Stone Age progression meta for this challenge in one fell swoop. I also purchased some bags of Pam's Crop Gardens. These spread like mushrooms, so I only need one garden of each variety, but there are quite a few of them. They spread very slowly, and the quest cooldown is 20 minutes in real time, so it's good to start collecting these things early. I will stop buying these once I have one of each, and just slowly spread them until I have an excess, and then break them down to get all of the ground crops. I want to try and eat as many different things as possible to buff my passive HP cap, and a solid 90% of food items are gated behind seed crops that you get from these things, so we definitely want to get these cracking. While I'm waiting for the trees to grow, I start making a new pen to hold my passive mobs and migrating them over. I've been using the old creeper spawning platform for this just to keep passive mobs from spawning in my farms, but the time has come for that space to be given a new purpose. Before I even finish moving the mobs, the sapling has grown and taken over the area. I finish moving all of the passive mobs over and then get to work on the tree. And it's a bust. This tree does not have what I'm looking for. Interestingly, the sapling drop rates on these trees are so low that you don't actually get a reliable replacement sapling, so I will run out of saplings eventually if my luck doesn't improve, but I'm not too worried. The chances of not getting what I'm looking for from the 4 saplings that I was given for the quest is very, very low, and I can just purchase more if I need to. I plant another silverwood down and distract myself with other tasks while waiting for it to grow. One of those tasks is trying to trade with some villagers. I have a few emeralds left over from the Great Loot Bag farm, and have been intermittently picking up emeralds just by looking through the villager pit and checking the trades. So I decided to see if I could get lucky with some rolls on a railcraft villager. In this particular pack, there is a chance that villagers can trade 1 emerald for a very large quantity of coal, and I am very much interested in securing a trade like that, because I kind of struggle with fuel supplies at the moment, and that is only going to get worse when I start boiling for steam. Unfortunately, I get nothing, and I'm just scammed out of 4 emeralds. Oh well. I take some time to clean up the mob plate, install some solid walls on it, and make myself a pickaxe. I then start the slow and delicate process of cleaning up the water creeper ball on the mob farm. Just because it isn't inconvenient now doesn't mean that it won't be later, and I also want the water and stone for reasons later on. This takes some time. I come down to check on the tree later, and it still hasn't grown. These things are usually not this slow, but I guess it's just taking its time. I roll for more gardens and get a tropical and water garden from the bag. Water gardens need to grow on water. Wow. So I take the time to set up a pool for it. No sense in not getting this started now when I will definitely want it in the future. And by the time that is finished, the silverwood tree still hasn't grown. Hurry it up already. In an effort to kill more time, I go check on my villagers again. In addition to finding a free emerald on the floor, I also find 2 trades that I'm interested in. One is for ender eyes, and these normally require HV tier technology to obtain, so useful. And the second is for alumentum. This is not super useful for me right now, given that the only thing I can use it for is furnace fuel or hand grenades, but Thaumcraft villagers do have trades that I'm looking for, so I will make sure to buy at least one just to see what other trades it will unlock. I go back to busy work, chopping down the great wood tree in the middle of my base, farming some crops, crafting some more garden bags. Even the time that it takes me to clean up the rest of the water creeper explosion is not enough to grow this stupid tree. This is getting really, really, really silly. The tree finally grows in when I'm coming back from the villager pit another time. We have a couple of good trades now, and I can purchase bookshelves from a librarian, trade Pam's mushrooms and beans to farmers for emeralds, and have an almond sapling to grow later. I immediately go to chop up the silverwood tree, and this one does have what we're looking for, something called a silverwood node. These nodes are, at the moment, useless. The regular Thaumcraft nodes don't spawn, well, they do, but I just delete them. And even in the base game, these silverwood nodes are more of a novelty than anything seriously useful. Their nodes hold a very small amount of this, which is basically this magic energy juice that you use to do things, and they drop nothing that we care about at the moment. What they do offer, however, is a way of changing the biome around the node to a magical forest. All silverwood nodes start with the pure trait, which forces the biome change, and you can tell that this tree has a node because of the dark spot on the log. This biome is critical for our progression because it is the only biome that Pechs can spawn in. Pechs are kind of weird as far as Minecraft is concerned. They are technically hostile mobs, they spawn only in darkness, and can spawn as Infernal or Thaumcraft boss mob variants. Despite this, they don't actually attack you unless you hit them, and they otherwise behave basically like any other neutral mob. There are 3 variants, but all variants behave the same. If you throw enough valuable items around them, which in this case valuable usually just means containing the greed aspect lucrum from the same mod, they will learn to like you, and can then be traded with using this weird, bogus RNG-based mechanic that is not worth explaining. Anything they find on the ground, they will pick up and hoard, and if they hoard more than 5 items, they will no longer despawn naturally, which is critical because it means you do not have to respawn these suckers every time you want to trade with them. It is incredibly useful. You can kill them to get the items they picked up back, but if they were valuable, according to the Pech, they will be lost for good, probably as an anti-cheese mechanic. They also regenerate passively, which is a good thing, because I shoot mine on accident more than a couple of times. All of them, without exception, are the stupidest mobs in existence, and I loathe them with every fiber of my being. The process of getting one of these things is miserable, and I make very sure that it has at least 5 different items in its inventory to keep it from despawning. I will cry if this thing leaves. Normally, I wouldn't have bothered getting this variant at all, but it took me 3 rounds of spawning these things to get a mage, so I figured I might as well just grab this too. Weirdness and blistering hate aside, their trades actually make them worth all of this hassle. Pech Stalkers, which is the first one I got, trade basically nothing useful except candles, if you can call them useful. Pech Mages trade in any of the 6 aspect shards normally available in base Thaumcraft, a couple wand foci, who cares, crystal clusters, and healing potions of various types. This allows you to begin using Thaumcraft without visiting the Twilight Forest, which is great, because I can't visit the Twilight Forest. Pech Foragers are where the mother lode is at. They trade Thaumium tools, Thaumcraft saplings, blaze rods, and most importantly, any of the 7 default native cluster types: iron, copper, tin, silver, lead, gold, and cinnabar. These give 2 ingots worth of their respective ore when smelted, and are by far their most common trade, making them an easy way to get quite a few resources if you have things to trade. Like all of those useless gold coins that I have lying around. All 3 of these pecks can also drop anything from the dungeon chest loot table if you trade in high enough value items, so more lucrum. Gold coins only have 1 lucrum in them, so we won't see many, if any, of these trades. But that's actually a good thing, because native clusters are the cheapest thing that Pechs can give you, and I end up with almost 500 of them by the time I'm done with this guy. This is a massive windfall. Let's get smelting. My first goal is to make enough bronze for a steam maceration setup. This means a steam macerator, a boiler of some kind, and any way of transporting steam. The macerator uses so little steam per operation that really any size of pipe is fine, and I can pretty much rely entirely on the capacity of the boiler. After more math than is really necessary, I decide I need to cook up 7 of my tin clusters and 20 of my copper. This will make just enough bronze for me to get what I need put together. Almost immediately, I run into another issue. I need bricks for the boiler. I have no clay to make bricks, and no emeralds to buy the fabulously overpriced apothecary clay. Like any good upstanding citizen, I first try and bum as much spare change as I can from random passersby, before finally resigning myself to the fact that I'm going to need to get a job and farm some mushrooms. I then bum some more change and sell the mushrooms anyway, earning twice the money for half the work, content in the knowledge that I can now virtue signal my social status to all of the lowly peasant villagers and still make fat stacks off their backs. Some more micro-crafting later, and I am now firmly in the steam age. Until the coal runs out, that is, because you cannot smelt wood in these things. I have no way of making charcoal, no way of getting large amounts of coal, and my only somewhat renewable supply of fuel for this thing is aluminum, which costs an emerald each. Ouch. Thankfully, these generators are pretty conservative in their fuel demands, so it should be enough to crunch through some of the maceratable items that I have accumulated. And boy howdy is there a lot of things to macerate. I throw together some blaze hoppers for basic automation. Side note, as far as I can tell, these are literally just hoppers but made with blaze rods, so no idea why Natura decided that that should be a thing. And then I start sorting through my junk. Any full durability items get thrown in, no questions asked, and anything that can be crafted into full durability items is crafted. I want the resources more than I care about the intact equipment at this point. The native clusters use more steam to macerate, despite being much faster to do so, so I will manually add those in later to avoid jamming up my system. This thing is not going to be turning off for basically ever. I don't get to rest on my laurels, though. I now have access to iron in bulk, which means that I can finally create tools that don't break after a few uses. This means more crop sticks, which means more wood, and I want to start breeding crops soon, since there's a couple of plants that I'll need for progression. But this is not a priority. Right now, I just need more stuff to build with, period. My first public work project is upgrading the village breeder. I need more emeralds and more trades, and more villagers solves both of those problems. I might eventually try to make a passive emerald generator using villagers and flowing water with a blaze hopper at the bottom, but for now I just need a way of moving villagers up into the breeder. This is trivial, cheap, and easy to implement, which are 3 things that almost never go together in this mod, and crafting the doors to upgrade the villager's maximum population cap takes longer than setting this whole mess up anyway. We now have double the baby busting potential. Sort of. I find out later that none of this actually worked and have to kill the villagers off, but it's the thought that counts, right? Incidentally, I know this is a video game, but this is an implausible number of children. Like, I'm not gonna judge them for what they get up to in their free time, but save some for the rest of us, yeah? Anyway, while that runs in the background, there is always more stuff to do. I add space for more gardens to grow, do a little bit of farming and maintenance, and get started with adding in the space for more farms. Industrial craft crops have a bunch of requirements for their optimal growth, but the general premise is to layer dirt 3 blocks thick under the crop stick, build them as high up as possible, hydrate them with water, and then grow in a swamp biome. I am doing 2 of those, because the other is impossible and the other one is impractical. And it won't really matter for a long time, but I want at least decent farms for crossbreeding, because I plan on doing a lot of that very soon here. My coal runs out in a couple of days, so I make sure that I grind up enough native tin and copper if I ever want to upgrade my systems, and let the macerator cool down on its own. I have options if I need to run this thing again, but I won't need to for a while, and I have other projects to work on, such as this massive light-controlled crossbreeder for industrial craft crops. Now that I've finally picked up enough spare change, I purchase a couple of bookshelves and check the villagers. They're still breeding, but I don't have trades that I need yet, and when coming back to store my stuff, I am almost obliterated by a couple of slimes. This corner of my island is on a slime spawning chunk, and usually that wouldn't be a problem, except that I am down low enough that they can spawn natively, and slimes also ignore light level, so this is going to be a recurring issue until I get some more atypical ways of preventing mob spawns. A few more days, and I finish the crop breeder. Oreberries will refuse to grow in fully lit environments, but most other crops are perfectly fine as long as they at least have a little light. This space should let me breed and grow basically everything without too much modification. On a whim, I check the villagers for change again, and am not disappointed. Rather than spare change, what I have in here is a wand trade. In traditional Thaumcraft progression, you have to go to the Twilight Forest, kill a Naga snake thing, and have some way of producing at least a little bit of aluminum before you can make your first wand. This means that technically you're not supposed to have access to any sort of Thaumcraft until very early MV. Or you could just buy a wand from a villager that may possibly make you just a little bit crazy when you use it by giving you something called warp. In regular Thaumcraft, warp is mildly annoying, but nothing to care about. In Gregtech New Horizons, enough of it will spawn wither bosses in your base, and needs to be managed incredibly carefully. The wand gives normal warp, however, which can be removed later on without too much trouble, and a little bit of warp right now is actually beneficial, so I'm not concerned at the moment. Right now, however, all of the things I care about don't require using any of the wand's vis, so that won't be an issue. What I want is a way of crafting clay. Early alchemy in Thaumcraft offers a super simple way of turning some basic materials into other basic materials, and one of those methods lets me replicate clay from water and gravel or dirt. To get access to that, I will need a cauldron with a fire underneath, some basic research, and an item called a Thaumnomicon, which is made by clicking a bookcase block with my wand. Research requires a research table, which is made by taking two Thaumcraft tables and right-clicking them with a scribing tool. The tool needs ink, a feather, and a file, which needs a rubber stopper. I am being progression blocked because I need something to keep my ink from drying out. Gregtech. Also, slimes are spawning in my crop breeding room and ruining the farmland. Thankfully, the overlap with the chunk is only a single block, so I just slammed some head down and stopped that little problem. Going back to the rubber, though, this is fixable, but it is kind of a long and drawn-out ugly process. I will need an extractor to pull raw rubber from slime. The extractor needs glass. I will also need an alloy smelter to smelt sulfur and rubber together, presumably to mimic the vulcanization process that real rubber goes through. But that means I need some way of making sulfur. The way you do this at this current stage of the game is with XP buckets, because I can't get any from the nether. But that will require an XP drain and some kind of tank to drain XP into and then pull out of. And the only kind of tank that I can make right now is a seared tank, which needs clay, which brings us all the way back to the start of this stupid problem, since I need clay to make clay. I also need clay to make a bricked hole from the alloy smelter, and we'll have to buy glass because I can't make it myself. All of this to say that some villagers are going to be very, very happy in the near future. To add to the fun, it's a blood moon, which relaxes the spawning range requirements for hostile mobs. Normally not an issue if everything is lit up, but guess what kind of mob doesn't respect light levels with its spawn requirements? That's right, slime! I end up just baiting them into the pond to drown and then shooting them to split them apart because they are so annoying to fight. In the chaos, I also dropped my Matic into the void on accident. Not a major loss, but sure, why not? Now that that mess is over, I need, roughly, 50 emeralds to progress. I could just wait and pick up loose change, but I also have a life. Surprising, right? So let's do what we can to speed that process up a bit. Beans can be obtained from stock gardens, which I have tons of, so I crack a few of those open, bone meal them, and then trade beans to the villager. The villager only takes 7 trades, which is fair because I wouldn't want that many beans either, and then offers to buy scallions off me, which I don't have. My other trade options are lettuce, which I don't have, and some shears, which I don't want to spend emeralds on. I don't have enough pork to bother bribing a butcher, and don't feel like selling gold to the 100 bajillion villagers that want to buy it, given that it is useful for trading with Pechs. So that's it for now. Time to wait for some better trades. While that's going on, let's talk about industrial craft crop breeding. In industrial craft, all plants are grown by placing the seeds of the plant on a block called a crop stick. If 2 crop sticks are touching a third crop stick that has had a second pair of sticks placed on it, there is a chance that those 2 parent plants will crossbreed. And this crossbreed can produce one of the same parent plants, or it can occasionally produce a third plant made by crossing the 2. You can use this process to get, for instance, very high stat, fast-growing and productive plants, or you can be selective with your parents to influence what possible crossbreeds you need. It is a surprisingly nuanced and complicated process, and in any other context I would love it, but right now I have none of the tools to identify the kinds of plants that I'm getting, don't care about their stats at all, and really do not want to spend the amount of time messing around with this mechanic as it demands. So instead, I'm just going to brute force it by slamming a bunch of very fast breeding plants together and calling it good. I decide to go with mushrooms, carrots, and oak saplings on the basis of literally nothing, because also I have no other really good options, and then crossbreed the living daylights out of them. This is going to become a trend. A lot of the more graceful mechanics of this mod pack kind of fall apart with challenge runs, so instead of doing things the right way, I will instead rely on that special kind of quality that only absolutely turbo stupid amounts of quantity can provide. I get so sick of having slime spawn on me that I decide to just cover the entire slime chunk with heads. It's ugly, and I do not care. I am done with being interrupted every 5 minutes because a slime has decided it wants to schlop its way through my farm. Not having anything else to do, I stopper myself up in a dirt hut. Aw, it's my first AFK hole! And then wait for my plants to finish growing. After we come back, I drop the crossbreeding sticks and almost immediately start getting results. I see something that looks like a dark oak bonsai, another something that is possibly barley, but I'm not certain. Most of the models on these plants are unique, but a lot of them look really similar, so with a few you just kind of have to let them grow unless you have a scanner or a plant lens to identify them. My goal now is to remove weeds, which are thankfully pretty distinct looking, cull any oak sapling or carrot crossbreeds that I don't care about, and then repeat the process until I get something that I'm interested in. Crossbreeding also consumes the crop stick in the process, so I will need to regularly resupply myself with those, but for now that's fine. I have plenty of iron and wood. A little more time to grow, and I can clearly see we have a couple of interesting plants here. My first guess of dark oak was definitely correct, and I have positive ID on acacia and birch bonsais as well. After rummaging around in my chests for my emeralds, I finally get a stroke of luck. I have a glass trade and a couple of other useful trades like knowledge shards and glowstone dust. The glass is the essential one here. I want a plant lens pronto and need glass for my extractor. The other two are mostly just nice to have. By the way, pressing T-search to search nearby inventories is literally the best thing in the game. All of my emeralds were in my macerator output chest for reasons beyond my comprehension. I would have never found them without this function. More time burns along, I do some more farming with my new plant lens. Most of my guesses were pretty close, but the one I thought was barley was actually rapeseed. Other than being a decent source of seed oil, I really don't care. I also get saguaro cactus, which I'm hoping can be crossbred into regular cactus eventually. I decide eventually, by which I mean after like 3 hours, that I've had enough farming for the moment, and then take stock of my crop situation. Big wins are that I have a source of every vanilla sapling now, and have bred myself some sugarcane, and a few modded crops of questionable value. Bamboo will let us complete a starter quest, if nothing else, and the rest are mostly just variations on the theme of random crop. There are no cocoa beans, sadly, but I will take what I can get. The villager breeder has not produced anything with a trade that I can take advantage of to produce emeralds, so I will instead need to go to Plan B and start designing a passive farm that makes use of villagers. Or I can just wait, which is probably what I'm going to do. That said, however, all of this will have to take place in the next episode. As always, thank you for your time. If you're feeling magnanimous, I would love to have you direct your attention down to all of those lovely little algorithm adjusters on the bottom of the video. Your support can be shockingly helpful, especially for smaller channels like this one. I hope you enjoyed.